And a warm welcome to you again. Good night, everyone. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you to this third episode of our Family Life Enrichment Series 2025 under the theme Unlocking Doors to Holistic Families. My name is Donna Barker, and I'm your moderator for this evening's session. Now, last week we had an engaging and encouraging session on relationships, closing and opening doors with Reverend Ken and Caroline Lane. Now, this evening, we have once again an enlightening and educating session on a slightly different topic. We're going to be going into a health topic. We're going to be looking at cancer, a closed and mysterious door. Now, this topic hits home with many of us. It hits close to home because I'm sure that everyone who is on tonight knows someone or knew someone who had or has cancer, and we know of some of the things that we hear they go through. And we want to hear more about that. We want to have some of our questions answered. So we have a medical doctor, medical expert, and she is going to share some information with us tonight on the topic of cancer. Our presenter tonight is Dr. Renee Boyce. She's no stranger to us, as she presented last year on the topic of menopause. And before she comes, I'm going to give you a little bit of information on Dr. Renee Boyce. Dr. Renee Boyce is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, class of 2004. She also has a postgraduate diploma in family medicine. She worked in the Department of Hematology before transferring to the Winston Scott Polyclinic. After working in the public system for over a decade, Dr. Boyce transitioned to private practice, where she currently manages her private practice, North Point Medical Services. She's also a part-time tutor at the University of the West Indies Cape Hill campus in the Department of Pediatrics. Over the years, Dr. Boyce discovered a passion for public speaking and teaching and has facilitated numerous lectures for churches and other social groups on various aspects of health. She has been a repeat guest on Morning Barbados television program and a weekly columnist on the Barbados Today's newspaper, online newspaper. For 5 years, she was the host of the Better Health radio show on VOB 92.9. She is an avid musician, capable of playing 4 instruments, and has been a keyboardist at her local church for nearly 30 years. She has been married for 20 years and is a mother of 2 children, ages 16 and 12. Dr. Boyce believes in striving for excellence and has completed her master's in healthcare management with distinction and is a certified corporate wellness specialist. Her purpose in life is to help others become the best versions of themselves by optimizing their health using the medium of education. So as Dr. Boyce presents to us this evening, I want to encourage you to place your questions, any questions you may have in the chat so that we can have the question and answer session at the end of her presentation. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Renee Boyce.
Thank you so much, Donna. Good evening to everyone. It really is my pleasure to be here again in the Family Life series to talk about a topic that is taboo, especially here in the Caribbean. Tonight, I want to reframe our thinking, sharing some information, yes, about cancer and some of the medical aspects of cancer, but my presentation tonight is more geared towards opening that mysterious and closed door. Whilst I put up my presentation, I am going to apologize in advance for Robin. We are all ours in this family, my husband, my 2 children, myself, and the dog. He is also an R, and he belongs to the neighborhood canine choir, so that anybody that passes, he is going to, have a choir rehearsal. So if you hear him in the background, just understand he's just stretching his vocal cords. Just pulling up my presentation here for you, and let me know, Donna, that it is clear for you. You're seeing it clearly?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the way I've chosen tonight to look at this is cancer, this mysterious door, the race to get ahead. Is it possible? Can we actually get ahead? What I hope to do in the next few minutes is to normalize the discussion around cancer. I also want to clarify some misconceptions associated with cancer and its treatment. And I also want to put listeners, viewers in a position where they can have a discussion with their healthcare providers, where the decision making comes from a position of knowledge as opposed to a position of fear. So we're going to look at the continuum of cancer. We're going to do a definition of cancer, look at some risk factors for cancer, and we're going to talk a little bit about screening tests, and we'll pull out one screening test so that we can understand what screening tests do in general. We're going to talk about lifestyle habits and the buzzwords, antioxidants and free radicals. And then I want to see if I can change our perspective on cancer. Definitely a recap to make sure that we have gone over, something has stuck from tonight, and then I'm looking forward to our question and answer session. So this is the continuum of cancer to which I was referring just now. And the sobering thought is that each of us is on this continuum somewhere, I can guarantee you, except for one place, death. Outside of that, everybody who's watching, who's listening, who will be watching in the future, everybody is on this continuum. Some people are at the stage where we would all love to be. No symptoms, we're cancer-free. And then we move along the continuum where there are no symptoms, so there's nothing to make us suspicious, but there's cancer present. There is the possibility that you can still have no symptoms, but there's a diagnosis of cancer, or you can develop symptoms. And then you go on to have your treatment depending on which modality you choose. And the options there after that would be either a cure or remission or death. So this is the continuum to which we will refer in the presentation later on. So stick a pin, put a picture of it in your mind, and we will go on. So just a few foundational terms to help us to understand a little bit more about how cancer develops. There is an entire area of research devoted to trying to understand what causes cancer. So there is no way tonight I can tell you how cancer is caused. No way. We'd be here until the same time tomorrow and we still would not have gone through. But just a few terms to help you to understand. So homeostasis. Homeo means same and stasis means stay or stand. So homeostasis is the body's ability to maintain a strict internal environment despite changes in the external environment. So let's say you have an infection and you realize for this infection, you develop a fever, and that's the body's way of responding to some of the chemicals and processes that are going on in the body as a result of the infection being developed. All cells need to divide in order to grow. So cell division is necessary, but cell division is an ordered process. It starts on command and it stops on command. So apoptosis is the regularized or programmed cell death. So you can imagine, therefore, that cancer cells have somehow found a way to come outside of this line of command. Our genes determine how we look, our speech, whether we have a mole in the middle of our forehead, whether we're short, tall, male, female. These things are determined by our genes. And what makes up our genes is DNA, genetic material that's composed of various combinations of these bases. And this makes us unique. So we move on to the definition. What is cancer? So according to the World Health Organization, it's a very simple definition. Cancer is a large group, and they were not kidding when they said large group. Cancer is a large group of diseases that can start in almost any organ or tissue of the body when abnormal cells grow uncontrollably. And they don't only grow uncontrollably, they move out of the space to which they're supposed to be confined, and they spread to different parts of the body. So the important parts here, it's that it can start anywhere, it can involve any organ, any tissue, and these are abnormal cells. They grow uncontrollably, and typically they move from where they're supposed to be and go to different parts of the body. That's the World Health Organization. It's always good to have somebody else's opinion. So this is the National Cancer Institute, I believe. And in their first definition, they said that cancer is a disease in which some of the body's cells grow uncontrollably and spread to other parts of the body. Yes, so this sounds very similar to the World Health Organization's definition, but what's missing is what I've highlighted in the revised definition, is that the cells are transformed. There is something wrong with the cells in cancer. They're not normal cells. So we can't just say some of the body cells, because that doesn't answer the uncontrolled growth. So these are transformed cells which are no longer under control. So in our minds now, we have an idea of what cancer is. So let's look at some numbers. Worldwide, 20 million new cases, and nearly half of the people who are diagnosed with cancer die. And that's a very sobering statistic. But some persons, for whatever reason, alterations in lifestyles or perhaps treatment, 53.5 million are alive after 5 years. And we usually talk about 5-year survival, 1-year survival, 5-year survival, 10-year survival when it comes to looking at cancer down the road. 1 in every 9 males die from cancer, 1 in 12. So we see that more men die from cancer than women. And this perhaps has to do with the health-seeking behavior of the males. They prefer not to go to the doctor, and by the time they get there, the stage is too advanced and little to nothing can be done for them. In terms of the most common cancers worldwide, this is worldwide, lung, then breast cancer in females, then colorectal cancer, then prostate, then stomach. But that's the worldwide picture. Let's take a look at good old BIM, right? Our country, Barbados. Take a good look. Take a good look. For colorectal cancer, we are 8th in the top 10. And these statistics came from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. 8th in the top 10 globally in terms of colorectal cancer. 5th in the incidence. So incidence means the number of new cases appearing or cases being found. 5th. And in terms of mortality rates, when mortality is death, prostate cancer, we're number 2. I think the value is 59 in every 100,000. In Barbados, prostate cancer is the commonest cancer in men, and breast cancer is the commonest cancer in women. Here on island, 1/4 of the people who have died is due to cancer. So cancer is something that has to be discussed. Cancer is something that we can't afford to be closed-minded or hidden. We have to open this mysterious door. So what are some of the risk factors? Why is it that person A develops cancer as opposed to person B? Certainly family history is one of the risk factors. It's a risk factor. It doesn't mean that it will happen. So it is more likely that if someone in your family has breast cancer, for example, more than one person in that family might have breast cancer, or they might have a different type of cancer. So you can have a family where 3 people in that family might have died from cancer, for example. When we look at genes, remember we spoke earlier, we defined what genes were. This was the material that determined your characteristics. So when these genes don't form the way that they should, for example, in Down syndrome, which is known as trisomy 21, they're predisposed to developing leukemias. Some persons have what we call oncogenes. Oncology is the area in medicine which deals with the study and treatment of cancer. So some of these genes, BRCA1 and 2, HER2, are present in some people and not present in others. And it is very possible that some persons who have these genes don't develop breast cancer. And there are persons who do have breast cancer that don't have these genes. And then age. Age is another risk factor for certain types of cancer. For example, a retinoblastoma, that's common in children. So children, newborns, they're screened when they're getting their assessment to make sure that they don't have this retinoblastoma, and it's not seen in adults, uncommon in adults. And sometimes they're just inherited genes or something goes wrong during fetal development that leads to the development of cancer. There are also issues in the environment. We can think about chemicals from factories, toxins in smoke, which is why the Minister of Health and Wellness advises that persons should not smoke. Pollutants in the air and water and exposure to radiation. If we go back several decades ago to that atrocity at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where it was the atomic bomb that was landed on the Japanese during the World War, I believe. Many of the persons there, as a result of exposure to radiation, subsequently developed cancers. Medicines, the oral contraceptive pill, for example, the estrogen in postmenopausal women has been associated with development of breast cancer. And viral infections, human papillomavirus, the causative agent for cervical cancer and some penile cancers. Here's another little definition for you. What is a carcinogen? It's a substance, organism, and agent that's capable of causing cancer. So there are many carcinogens in cigarette smoke. So, diet. We are what we eat. So diets which are high in unsaturated fats have been linked to colon, breast, and maybe prostate cancer. We know that the liver processes alcohol, so excess alcohol can lead to liver cancer and head and neck cancers. And some of the smoked foods, they really do taste good, but they could be progenitors to stomach cancer. Obesity. Here in Barbados, obesity is a problem for several reasons. The way we eat, the way we've been cultured, the fact that most people don't know that they're obese. It never ceases to amaze me when I say to a patient, based on your height and your weight, you fall in the category of obese. And I can see the full whiteness of their eyes because their eyes pop open. And obese me, they don't think so. Some people say they're not obese, they're fluffy or they're well padded, but obesity has been linked to these cancers. And perhaps at the end, we can talk about how obesity causes cancer. So that's one of the things that we can discuss. So we're back here at this continuum of cancer. On one end, no symptoms and cancer-free. On the other end of the spectrum, we've either been cured or somebody has died. But this is where we want to be. This is where everybody wants to be. No symptoms and cancer-free. So enter in screening tests. So what's a screening test? Before we get there, think about this picture. Which do you think is easier to manage? Which do you think is easier to manage? We have on the right, this group of puppies, and they are laying there confined to their little box. And then we have another set of dogs running wild and carefree, not a care in the world. Which one do you think is easier to control? And certainly it's easier to control the ones that are confined in their little box. And this is why screening tests are valuable. The purpose of a screening test is to try to pick up conditions at the earliest stage of that condition, before there are any symptoms. Screening tests are not done willy-nilly. So you don't just wake up one morning and decide to do a screening test on somebody. Screening tests are done with a purpose in mind. Any test is done with a purpose in mind, because once you get a result, you must do something with that result. So screening tests are done in at-risk populations. And below I have some examples of screening tests. For example, mammograms. Your blood pressure checks are screening tests, because we're looking to see whether or not your blood pressure is high before you develop symptoms of uncontrolled blood pressure. PSA testing, prostate-specific antigen testing, and the M2 fit testing for the stool test, looking for blood and perhaps the indication that there might be some colon cancer going on there. So keep in mind that I have said to you, HPV is one of the causative agents for cervical cancer. HPV is a sexually transmitted disease in the vast majority of cases. And the way the screening test for cervical cancer is pap smears. So one of the questions we're going to discuss is whether or not virgins should have a pap smear. This is a topical issue. So remember that. All right, so let's take out the PSA out of that group of screening tests and take a look at how screening tests work. So we said that screening tests are done in an at-risk population. So we're going to do a PSA in adult males. We're not going to do a screening test for prostate cancer in an 11-year-old boy. That's a waste of resources. It would have to be some strange reason why that would be necessary. So generally speaking, the guidelines say that you start screening at age 55, but you screen earlier if you're at high risk. And high risk would be whether you've had first-degree relatives, so that would be your father or brothers, who has prostate cancer, or 2 or more second-degree relatives who've had prostate cancer. And especially if they've had prostate cancer at a young age, you're advised to start screening earlier as well. It's the same thing, for breast cancer. So if a mother was diagnosed with breast cancer at an early age, her daughter is advised to start screening, I believe, 10 years before. And the guidelines change all the time, but we see the logic. So they were diagnosed with cancer. We're trying to get ahead of the game. So we're not going to wait until we're going to start screening you before. But the general public for males, age 50, 55. It's a simple blood test. And I say simple for those persons who don't mind being stuck. It's not simple for people who don't like being stuck. That is a challenge. The big question always is, now that we have this blood test, the PSA, that can show whether or not the values are elevated, do we still need to do the rectal exam? And the answer is a resounding yes. The reason is, it is quite possible for a male to have prostate cancer with a normal PSA. And that's not meant to scare you, but that's information that needs to be shared. What the advantage of the prostate digital rectal examination is that it allows the physician or other healthcare provider to feel the prostate, and they might be able to feel areas of irregularity within the prostate, which would prompt them to do further testing. We're going to look at age-specific screening in the next slide, but this is just a general look at the results. So in previous years, we said carte blanche all across the board, 0 to 4, normal. Once you have a 0 to 4, you're good. When it started going from 4 to 10, there was a 25% increased risk of cancer. And these persons, they were screened a little more, further testing was done. Greater than 10, it's a 50% chance that you have prostate cancer. But no, especially because we see that the incidence of prostate cancer is increasing, and more so younger men are developing prostate cancer, the values have changed. So instead of 0 to 4 for a male between 40 to 49, we bring the normal range down to 0 to 2.5. So of a male who's 43 years old, for example, and his PSA is 3, that's going to be a red flag for him. And the reason why the value increases as the age goes up is that the prostate gland produces that PSA, that the chemical that is being looked for in the blood test. As men age, their prostate ages. So therefore you can understand then A bigger prostate, more PSA. So that's why the value goes up as you age. So you don't have to learn the values per se, but understand that at different age groups, the values change. So let's look a little bit at cancer diagnosis, and we are moving smoothly along. So we have a suspicion of cancer. There's some symptoms, something has gone wrong that has made us think, you know what, everything is not right here. Or one of the screening tests that has been done comes back positive. And one of the things that we need to understand is that tissue is required for diagnosis, which is why we have biopsies, prostate biopsy, biopsy of the breast lump, removal of blood or bone marrow. All of these are different things we do to get tissue, because we need to be able to specify the type of cancer, and we need to see how much we can discover about this particular type of cancer. And this is where we talk about grading and staging. You might have heard these terms, you know, stage 1, stage 4. It's a high grade versus low grade. So grade speaks to how aggressive the cancer is, whether when the cells are looked at under the microscope, a low grade tumor, the cells are not well differentiated, sorry. The cells are well differentiated, right? The non-aggressive one. And they look a lot like the mature cells they're supposed to look like. But a high grade tumor, where the cells are not well differentiated, very aggressive, these are the ones that tend not to do well. Stage is how far has it progressed from where it started. So the lower stages would be, oh, it's just nearby to where it was. If it's in the prostate, it might have just gone outside the capsule of the prostate, spread a little further, and it's gone to some of the other pelvic organs. But when it's gone to stage 4, that's when it has spread beyond the margins where it should be. Take our minds back to the definition from the World Health Organization and the Cancer Institutes, where they talk about these cancer cells being uncontrollable and going beyond where they should be normally. So stage 4 would be a cancer that has spread to distant sites like the liver, the brain, the bones, and the spine. And this is what we call metastatic disease, or you hear people have METs or their metastases. This is what it means. And of course, after there's a diagnosis of cancer, we start looking at treatment modalities. Now, treatment for cancer, and I'm sure your minds went directly to chemotherapy. But treatment for cancer entails so much now. It does involve chemotherapy, yes. It might involve radiotherapy. It might simply be watching and waiting, depending on if it's a low-grade, early-stage cancer. It could be the use of complementary medicine. What I want us to understand for treatment modalities is that research has to be done by the healthcare provider, as well as by the patient, as much as he or she is able to do so, or relatives, so that you can make an informed decision about your treatment. And it is okay to opt not to be treated. The patient has rights. The patient can make choices for his or herself, depending on, you know, whether they're lucid and so on, and they're not, the disease hasn't spread so much that they're not able to make decisions. But generally speaking, persons can make decisions for themselves concerning their health. They have autonomy. So not being treated for a cancer is a treatment as well. So that's another push on that mysterious door of cancer, you know, gasp, not treating, opting not to treat cancer, coming out of the mouth of a physician. So a little case here. And let me issue my disclaimer. This is a completely made up case. This isn't anybody I've seen. This isn't anybody I know. If this represents somebody who was here online, it is purely incidental, okay? Purely coincidental. A 51-year-old male went to his GP because he was feeling tired and he was having some lower back pain. He was an active person who attended the gym 4 days a week, and he worked as a foreman on a construction site. Now, when he did go to the doctor, he mentioned that his girlfriend was concerned because he seemed to be losing weight quickly and he was not eating as much as before. So this is unintentional weight loss. Unintentional weight loss is when you lose about 10% of your body weight within the preceding 3 to 6 months without trying to do so. So is there a way that persons can type in online to see whether they think this is cancer or not, or should we go along and just do it at the end? All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead, but that's two things that we have to come back to. So whether or not this gentleman has cancer. So cancer symptoms, shocker. There are no specific symptoms for cancer. I'll say it one more time. There are no specific symptoms for cancer. Let me just say it one more time. There are no specific symptoms for cancer, but there are red flags which might make us suspicious. So we spoke about one, unintentional weight loss. Malaise. Now, malaise is this general feeling of, I want to say, unwellness. You don't feel well. You cannot put your finger on it, but something is not quite right. And as physicians, and over the years, personally, I have learned when patients say, I do not feel well, something is not right. No matter if I've examined them from head to toe and I have not found anything by what I've done, they're right. They're right. Because once they feel unwell, something is wrong. It might not be what they were thinking, but something is wrong. Patients are usually right, except in the cases where they're maligning and trying to get out of work and so on. But we're not talking about that. So that's malaise. Another one would be enlarged lymph nodes. So lymph nodes are part of the lymphatic system, the drainage system, and they're responsible for helping to fight infection and to clear things out of the body. So they're lymph nodes, several areas in the body. We have them in the neck. We also have them under the arms. We have them in the groin, and all of the body, there are lymph nodes. If you have enlarged lymph nodes, especially if somebody else can look at you and see your enlarged lymph nodes, that's a red flag. Another one would be abdominal distension. Why is your tummy growing? And that's in local parlance. If some of my colleagues heard me talking about tummy growing, but your tummy getting bigger and you can't explain it, that's another red flag. Another one would be pain. Now, you see this thing about pain. There are so many causes for pain, but if you appropriately treat pain and it comes back, and you can't understand what caused the pain. So you were going down the stairs and you twisted your ankle and you've gotten pain. You know the cause of that pain. So I should have written here, unexplained pain. And if it comes back and it's in the same place, if it's of the same character, or if it's not going away despite what you do, that is a red flag and it should be checked out. Now, your eyes are supposed to be white except for the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. So if your eyes are yellow, that is a red flag, all right? Rectal bleeding. Now, when we were created by God, I mean, it's fascinating. I think that people should get the opportunity to see inside of a body. It is fascinating. It's not gross or freaky or anything like that. It's fascinating. Blood is a specialized fluid. It is so specialized that it has its own carrying system, so that blood is not supposed to be anywhere except if you've been cut, which means that that specialized system has been broached, or you are a female in the reproductive age and you're menstruating. Blood being seen outside of those two categories is a red flag. Thus and therefore, if your nose is bleeding, something is wrong. If you are coughing up blood, something is wrong. If you are passing blood from your bottom, something is wrong. And a caution to postmenopausal females, and this is a mistake that is made quite often. Menopause means that you, and we did this last year, you have not had a period for the preceding 12 months. So today is the 28th of May, 2025. Let's say your last period was the 21st of February, 2024. You've seen no periods, no blood, no bleeding at all. You have gone into menopause. For whatever reason, you go to the bathroom tomorrow and you happen to see blood. That is not your period returning. That is a red flag. No pun intended. That is a red flag and a reason for you to get to the doctor quick, fast, and in a hurry. Oh, see, there is. So these are red flags, and recurrent fevers, especially fevers at night, that's a red flag. So if you have a cold and you have a fever, that's understandable. But if you can't find a reason for you to have this fever, red flag, and red flags should be investigated. Now, there are some tumors which are usually missed. In medicine, diagnoses are made based on a history, the information you get from a patient, the physical examination, what you do with your hands and the instruments that you have, and further investigations, blood tests, and so on. So history, examination, any investigations that you can do, and you come up with a diagnosis. HIV, syphilis, and cancer are great mimickers, meaning that they look like other things, which means that the healthcare provider must always have an index of suspicion for cancer. The ovaries are in the pelvis, so you really can't palpate the ovaries. Palpate meaning press. And therefore, by the time ovarian cancer is found, it's usually in the later stages. And the same thing for the pancreas. The pancreas sits behind the stomach, so you can't press it from the stomach and you can't feel it from the back. And in most cases, persons are diagnosed with reflux when pancreatic cancer is beginning to speak. So if you've been properly investigated and treated for reflux and your symptoms are still occurring, then we should start thinking maybe this is not reflux and perhaps we should look elsewhere. Now, prevention is better than cure. This is the side of medicine that we should hope to sit on, that the heavier weights of the scale are on preventative medicine rather than trying to find cures. But because of where we are, we have to try to find cures because we're existing in states where there is illness. So we have to try to find cures. Now, we saw before that certain foods and certain medical conditions are risk factors for cancer. So the question is, as we push this door a little further, is the converse true? Can certain foods prevent us from developing cancer? Well, certain lifestyle habits have been shown to reduce the risk of development of cancer. For example, maintaining a healthy weight. And it makes sense. If obesity is a risk factor for developing cancer, then maintaining a healthy weight is going to put you on the side of less risk for developing cancer. And your weight is based on, well, what we're using nowadays is the body mass index. And in medicine, we never agree on everything. Some persons say body mass index is not useful. You know, people talk about bone density and all these different things. And persons say, you know, I've always been big my life. My family is big like this. But for the purposes of this discussion, your height really is a determinant for what you should weigh. So some person like me who's not 5 feet tall should not weigh the same as a person who is 5'4". That would take me into overweight and obese. We spoke about the carcinogens in cigarette smoke. So if we do smoke, and remember that the Minister of Health and Wellness advises that persons should not smoke. So if we stop smoking, then we tip the scales in our favor. And our physical activity, which should be regular, tipping us over to that maintenance of a healthy weight should include both cardio and strength training. And strength training doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and join a gym. You can do body weight exercises. You can fill bottles with sand. You can use the cans in your cupboard to get resistance. You can use bands. So there is a way outside of joining a gym. If there's anybody who's online, I'm not trying to take away business from you, but understanding the economic climate as it is. And we want to have a diet which is high in fiber, low in processed foods, and low in polyunsaturated fats. Remember, we saw that diets high in unsaturated fats were associated with kidney, breast, colon, and stomach cancers. Avoid sun exposure, especially if you are fair-skinned. We need sun, for vitamin D, but too much sun, too much of a good thing is never good. We must get vaccinated. We spoke about HPV and human herpes virus. These are viruses which are involved in the development of cancer. So if you can get vaccinated against these viruses, well, then that would help in preventing the cancers which are as a result of these. So in recent years, to our immunization schedule, the HPV vaccine for both girls and boys was added to the regular schedule of vaccines. And we saw the value of screening tests when we were talking about the prostate cancer test. So get your regular screening test. It is amazing to me the explanations patients give for not getting screening tests. I'll share two examples. One lady did not want to get her mammogram because her son told her that he did not want her being exposed to radiation. Another lady, and this one I've heard quite commonly, another lady said she wasn't going to get her mammogram because a friend told her that it is painful. And so when I hear that, and I've heard it quite often, I usually put down my pen. I just sit back in my chair and I smile. And I try to shift the perspective by just asking one simple question. So your friend told you that the mammogram was painful. So this means that your friend got her mammogram? Is that what this means? And I just leave it there and allow the individual to think about what that means for her. And of course, in this day and age, we have got to try to do something about the stress levels that we find ourselves under day in and day out. The Bible says, be anxious for nothing, for a good reason. So it wouldn't have been written in the Bible, be anxious so that you reduce your risk of cancer. But God knew that significant stress and unhealthy lifestyles would have predisposed us to various illnesses. So hence the command, don't be anxious. Let's talk a little bit as we wind down about antioxidants and cancer. All right, so free radicals are compounds that occur in the body as a result of the body's normal and natural processes, but also as a result of environmental exposure and challenges from the environment. Now, antioxidant is not a nutritional property. So we don't have 2 milligrams of antioxidant per se. An antioxidant is a compound which acts like an off switch so that it turns off the free radicals. It turns off these rogue agents. And it's found in several foods. And these are just some examples. So hesperidin, which is found in the citrus fruits, what it does after vitamin C does its work and it goes to battle and it's fighting all the free radicals, the hesperidin restores the vitamin C so that it's able to continue fighting, right? And these are just examples that you can take a look at of antioxidants in the various foods. And so this is why we have the craze, I don't want to say craze, where now everybody is drinking matcha tea because of the green tea and the antioxidants in there, but several foods, and which is why we're supposed to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables. All right, so this is where we start our thinking shift. All right, I want to compare two chronic diseases. let's look at cancer. Cancer is a chronic disease, all right? So what happens for cancer? That there's some concerning symptom or an abnormal screen, and then a diagnosis is made. After this diagnosis is made, the treatment options are discussed and some treatment option is chosen. Chemotherapy, radiotherapy, complementary medicine, watch and wait, some treatment modality. And there's our outcome. Either there's remission, so it responds to the treatment, including lifestyle changes, or unfortunately, there's death. All right, so this is what happens in the case of cancer. But can I tell you that something with which we are very familiar and very comfortable, chronic kidney disease, it's the exact same thing. There was an abnormal screen. So you went for your blood test and your urea and creatinine were high and they thought, oh my goodness me, something is going on with the kidneys. So the diagnosis is made of chronic kidney disease. Treatment options are discussed. You go on medication, you change your diet, or perhaps you're at the stage where you have to go on dialysis. And then there's the outcome. So either the values go back down or they stabilize, or the person dies of chronic kidney disease. So the question, therefore, as we open this mysterious door, why is it that we are okay, as it were, with chronic kidney disease, but cancer, which has the same exact process, there's a completely different reaction and mindset? We need to change our perspective. So first of all, knowing that there is cancer, knowing that there's a continuum, it should be a driver for us as Christians to urgently share the gospel, because we don't know where we are on that continuum. Well, some of us, some persons know where they are. And therefore, the person who works with you, who sits in the cubicle next to you, the person that you sit next to on the bus, the persons in your family, it really behooves us to think this way, that we need to urgently share the gospel with them because we don't know where they are. It provides us the opportunity to present Jesus as a healer for both physical symptoms and emotional symptoms, because just now in that slide where we were comparing chronic kidney disease and cancer, some person might say, well, you know, you don't get that significant pain with chronic kidney disease. Yes, you do. And then there's the emotional distress that comes along with getting a diagnosis of cancer. You don't get that with chronic kidney disease. Yes, you do. You know, the same worries and fears about your family and dying and leaving your children and being dependent on others, it occurs in chronic kidney disease. Same thing, right? So present Jesus as a healer, but it provides us as nationals, as thinkers, an opportunity for research. We have a whole graduate research studies unit. I'm sure that they're doing brilliant work there, but this needs to be stepped up. We have lots of indigenous plants, legal plants, which can be used, bay leaves, dog dumplings, noni, all of these different things. Could it be that hidden in these things which we take for granted, lemongrass, almond tree blossoms, that there's something in there that could be a cure for cancer? This causes us to reorient the healthcare sector in two ways, I believe. Remember, in this slide, we see this picture here of perspective. We need to shift our focus from curative medicine to preventative medicine. So the focus in the healthcare sector should be on trying to prevent these illnesses. And I'm sure that the men and women at the Ministry of Health and Wellness are working assiduously to do this, but they can't do the work that they need to do when we as a people have not shifted our thinking. And it also causes us to understand that we need to provide at the other end of the spectrum, where we need hospice care for persons who are terminally ill. And it's not only cancer patients who need hospice care. It could be somebody with advanced congestive cardiac failure, or advanced chronic kidney disease, or sleep apnea. Any advanced stage where your quality of life is significantly impaired, this person can benefit from hospice care. So we do need hospice care. So we have to look at where we're putting our resources in the healthcare sector. But this offers us an opportunity again as a little 2x4 country to punch above our weight, to reposition us as a country worth taking a look at because of how we manage our cancer cases, how we manage our resources in the healthcare as it pertains to cancer. So this is another opportunity that the way we view our perspective on cancer, it provides an opportunity for us as a country. So we're taking a look from the beginning. So cancer is not the result of one single factor. There's several risk factors that we've discussed. Your age, your family history, exposure to chemicals, medications, your lifestyle. All of these are risk factors for cancer. We took a surface view into understanding how things work at the cellular level in order to understand that cancer cells are these transformed cells that go outside of the normal control in the body, and they go where they're not supposed to go. They go where no cell has gone before. Screening tests are important. There are some persons who think that, for example, mammograms are just a way for persons to make money. There are some doctors who take that position that mammograms are unnecessary and it's just a money-making venture. Everybody has his or her own opinion. But we've seen that screening tests are important. So again, I think I want to drop on the side of the need for a conversation with persons in the healthcare sector, with your healthcare provider. You need to be able to come to the table with information. It's no longer that paternalistic where the doctor says, and this is it. We are opened up to information on the internet, and we'll discuss that as well, because we're into the question and answer session. But when you go to your physician, you speak to him or her. When you go to your pharmacist, have a conversation about your medications. I saw on the television that this particular medication has a zillion side effects. And then the pharmacist has the opportunity to explain to you that these side effects are listed in order of frequency and how often these side effects occur. The drug companies are supposed to list any side effects that have occurred. So if taking medication A, for example, caused my left fifth toe to turn black, that must be listed as a side effect of taking that medication. Once I've taken that medication and that has happened to me, it might not be the causative agent, but it must be listed. So you shouldn't think, therefore, that when you go and take that medication that your left fifth toe is going to turn black. So it opens up the dialogue for sharing information and for a deeper understanding of how things work. Various treatments are available. And again, I'm going to say not being treated is also an option. So I don't think that patients should be bullied into taking one particular treatment over another. Autonomy. So we give you the advice, you do your own research, and we make an informed decision, and we travel the road together. Nothing is more important than having a healthy lifestyle. Nothing is more important than having a healthy lifestyle. And this doesn't only pertain to cancer, it pertains to all the other chronic diseases as well. So hypertension and diabetes. Diabetes is a risk factor for developing cancer as well. So if we can tip the scales, as I keep saying, in our favor, then we should try our best to eat the right way, exercise regularly, and reduce our stress levels. And as I said, in the previous slides, that we need to change the way we look at cancer, because things which are not spoken about freely, it's amazing. In the larger countries like the United Kingdom and in the USA, you would be sitting on a bus and having a general conversation with somebody, and somebody's going to tell you that they have stage 3 cancer of the colon. Here in Barbados, you could have Mets. You are not going to say a word. And sometimes this is why we have problems in families, because all of a sudden you're dealing with a relative who has stage 4 cancer. Now you have to go and scramble and try to figure out who's going to take care of their children, who's going to take care of them because you're working, or they were the primary breadwinner. What's going to happen to the family? And it also has import on the family history. So some people have died with their diagnosis of cancer, and the other people, generations down, have no idea that this particular cancer lurks in their family. So you hear, well, nobody in my family never had this. but somebody in your family probably went to their grave with it. So we need to change the way we view cancer. There's so much more to discuss, and we will do that right now. These are my references, and this is me, and these are my contacts. I want to say thank you very much for your attention. So are there any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let's see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Renee. And we have a number of questions. Yes, we do.
All right.
I'm going to start with the questions from the chat. The first question I saw is, do we have measurements? I'm not sure if you answered this one in the presentation, but do we have measurements for prostate per age group?
Yes, and I did mention that, the slide that I showed, because as I had mentioned in the presentation, as you get older, the prostate gets larger, therefore the values that are tolerated for an older gentleman would be a red flag in a younger gentleman. So okay, that's information that can be discussed with your doctor. And it's also on the internet. I already closed the presentation, sorry, but yes, there are values by age.
Okay, thank you. Can a high PSA speak to a condition other than cancer?
Yes, that's a very good question. This is the thing about screening tests. Screening tests are not diagnoses, which is why I said that we need tissue in order to make a diagnosis. There are other conditions, and we took out prostate screening as our screening test to discuss tonight. So other conditions can cause the prostate specific antigen levels to be elevated, such as an enlarged prostate. So an older man would tend to have a higher PSA, but also inflammation or infection of the prostate. And riding a bicycle for a long distance has also been shown to raise the PSA level. So the recommendation for when you're going to do your PSA testing is do not ride from St. Lucie down to Christchurch in the preceding 48 hours. So those are some of the conditions that can cause it to be elevated.
Thank you. And our third question, why is an extended waistline in men significant?
Yes, so an extended waistline in men and women is significant because it's an indicator of obesity, and obesity is a risk factor for cancer. It is thought that persons who are obese, they have a state of chronic inflammation, and because of that, the inflammatory cytokines, or the chemicals which are produced as a result of being in that state of inflammation, are thought to promote the abnormal growth of cells. And the fat tissues, they also produce substances which promote the growth of cells. And it's also been shown that some of the chemicals inside of fat cells, which could be preventative or protective with certain cancers, are in lower levels in obese people as opposed to persons who maintain a normal weight. And another thing is that persons who are obese, they have higher levels of insulin and insulin-like growth factor 1, which are thought to be promoters of cancer.
Okay. We have another question. Can you explain a bit more why people afflicted with cancer invariably lose weight?
So cancer cells, all of the cells in our body require nutrients, all the normal cells. What happens is that cancer cells, they're growing at such a rate that they're taking up food that doesn't belong to them. That's a simple way to look at it. And therefore, they need energy, and they're going to find energy wherever it comes from. So they're taking up the regular input that the person has, and their turnover rate is so rapid that they're using more than is being taken in. And then in most cases, persons who have cancer, they feel unwell, they're not eating anyhow, and therefore they start to lose weight, which is why unintentional weight loss is a red flag for cancer.
Yeah. We have the questions are coming. You spoke about contraceptives being used by women over 45. How can this contribute to cancer?
Okay, well, I didn't give an age. I said postmenopausal women, because there are women who use contraceptives over the age of 45. But many of the cancer cells are hormone dependent, so that you would notice that there are some women who would have been diagnosed with breast cancer. For certain treatments for them, it's advised, especially if they've completed their family life and they're postmenopausal and so on, that they have a hysterectomy because of the effects of the hormone, especially the estrogen, on the lining of the uterus and the possible development of uterine cancer. There was also many, many years ago, I don't know if we remember, when women going through menopause would have been told not to use hormone replacement therapy because of the risk of developing cancer. And this is the thing about data and research and looking at studies, right? Numbers say what you want them to say. And you have to read studies, and the caution is for persons when you're going and doing your research on the internet, read carefully. However, so that first study came out and it said that this hormone replacement therapy was causing cancer in women, when it was that the wrong category of women were being given the hormones to take, so that so many women that were suffering with the symptoms of menopause that could have been helped because of that report were not helped. And then it shifted when the research was reviewed, and the category of women that can take the hormones, it has changed so that women can have hormonal replacement therapy, but it's individualized, right? It is individualized.
Okay, good to hear. Another question here. Does perimenopause cause gastrointestinal issues?
Perimenopause is a very interesting phase in a woman's life, because you can still be having a regular menstrual period, but there's so many things in each system that's going wrong. Brain fog, for example. So you tend to forget things. You can also have increased joint pain. And yes, it can cause gastrointestinal issues. My advice is, and always will be, any symptom that concerns you should be brought up with your healthcare provider, and it should be investigated. But yes, the short answer to that question is yes, perimenopause can come with gastrointestinal issues.
Cool. I see two more questions. Does not drinking enough water impact on having cancer in any way?
I haven't come across anything that indicated not drinking enough water is a risk factor for cancer, but we need to drink water, we do. And maybe if you live in a parish where the water is brown, perhaps, other liquids other than water you should try to drink, maybe unsweetened teas or lemon water or something else. But water is essential to life. It is. We're 60% water, I think. Yeah. So we need to drink water. But I haven't seen anything that said that it leads to cancer.
Okay. Is it true that cancers thrive on sugary foods? We hear that a lot.
I knew that question was coming. So the short answer is it doesn't seem that way. Lots of people are saying stop the sugar, starve the cancer. One of the problems with that is when you stop sugar, the normal cells in your body still require glucose. And we're talking about glucose here. The normal cells in your body still require glucose for energy. There isn't a way as yet for us to say normal cells, you take the glucose, and abnormal cells, you don't take the glucose. And so not not giving the body glucose isn't going to stop the cancer cells from growing, because they need other things. They need amino acids, right? Which come from proteins. So they're going to get the energy from proteins. So you haven't stopped them from growing by not giving them sugar. However, by reducing the amount of sugar that you intake, your insulin levels. Remember, we spoke about insulin and insulin-like growth factor being risk factors. So too much sugar is not healthy. It predisposes you to cancer. Some people might have found that by reducing glucose and actually what happens is when people reduce glucose, they automatically start eating better. So they include more fruits and vegetables because they've cut out the sugars now and their lifestyle has been altered. So is it that it was reducing the sugar, or was it that you're now living and eating a little more healthily?
Right.
But they haven't found that direct link from the research that I did.
Right. Okay. I have a question about the HPV. A lot of people are concerned. They get concerned when we talk about offering this vaccine to their little 11 and 12-year-olds to prevent cancer, later on in life that is caused by adult behaviors. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Why is it given to 11 and 12-year-olds, offered at that stage?
So the way the immune system works is that the infectious agent, the bug, the germ, it gets into your system and your body recognizes it as something foreign. So it sets up a defense system and it keeps a memory of this particular germ so that in the event that it is faced with this germ again, it already has a special platoon, a group that is ready to fight. And what happens is that the symptoms from the disease are going to be less, or they're not going to manifest at all. The way vaccines work is that we take a little piece of the germ in amounts that are not sufficient enough to cause illness, but sufficient enough to mount the immune response. So that when you get your vaccine, the body recognizes it as this particular foreign entity. This is not supposed to be here. So they mount the response and they keep a memory so that when the disease comes, they're ready to fight. So it's the same thing. The disease is not going there. Hopefully, your 11-year-old is not sexually active. We pray that this is so, but it's going to take a few years for the disease to develop. So we want to have the protection on board so that if later on in life they come into contact with the virus, then they're not going to develop cervical cancer. And this is what we talk about perspective, because we give our first vaccination is at 8 weeks.
Right.
Is at 8 weeks. So we give an 8 weeks old child a vaccine. Certainly we can give an 11-year-old child a vaccine that in the future has the potential to almost eradicate cervical cancer as one of the causes of death.
Yeah.
I think persons are afraid because it is a vaccine that's trying to prevent a disease that's caused by a sexually transmitted disease. I think that's where the fear came. If it was to prevent the child developing an ear tumor, then there would not be that question at all.
Right.
I don't want my child to get this ear tumor, right?
Yeah. Another question I have is, when we look at the risk factors, how much does genetics play a part compared with the lifestyle factors like healthy eating, exercising, or are all of them the same level in terms of their risk of getting cancer?
I think I can't say that genetics plays a bigger role as opposed to lifestyle, but we don't pay enough attention to lifestyle, the impact of lifestyle. I don't have a particular number that says that when it comes to having let's say breast cancer, and the person has a particular breast cancer gene, that they're going to get cancer. Don't have that particular number. But in terms of reducing your risk, whether or not you have the particular oncogene, certainly by living healthily, you reduce your risk. That's not to say that somebody who is vegan and who exercises 4 times a week won't develop cancer, right?
Right.
But their risk of it happening is much less than somebody who lives an unhealthy lifestyle.
Thank you. There was another question that was posed. Is it true that we are all born with cancer cells?
So I think that there is always the potential. When we look at the definition of what a cancer is, it's a cell that has come outside the normal control of the body's orders or commands. So I think every cell has that potential, and we all have those cells. And there are children who are born with what we call congenital lymphomas, for example, tumors of the lymph nodes. And we saw that children who have Down syndrome, they are more predisposed to leukemias. So there is a potential in each of us, I believe, to have to develop cancers. I don't know that there is a particular cancer cell residing in our bone marrow that something triggers it later on in life, some exposure or drug or life event. But there always is the potential. Once you are alive, there is the potential to develop cancer.
Okay, and I have one more question. We hear about chemotherapy and we hear about radiotherapy. I'm sure you touched on them in your presentation. Could you give a little bit more or touch on them again, a little bit more information on the two or comparing the two?
Sure. So chemo, when we think chemo, we think chemical. So chemotherapy is the use of drugs to treat cancers. If we were to, no, that's probably going to confuse things, because I was just about to say that since it's a drug that's used to treat cancer, we could probably think of, antihypertensives as, a drug to treat a particular thing. So this is how chemotherapy works. Based on the diagnosis that you would have had. Remember, we spoke about the need for tissue diagnosis. On the tops of cells, there are different receptors where different proteins and so on land that open up the cell and give commands and cause the cells to grow. What chemotherapy does is that it has found a way to kill these processes that go on in the abnormal cells. So you can get chemotherapy in different ways. You can get chemotherapy via injection. You can get it in the muscles. You can get it in the veins. You can get chemotherapy by use of tablets. And what has happened over time, now that we're understanding that there are particular receptors on cells, chemotherapy is becoming more targeted. So we're having more targeted therapies for treatment, as opposed to treatments that used to kill off all the cells, good, bad, and the ugly. Everybody used to get killed off in previous years, but with the advancement of technology and the development of drugs, chemotherapy has become a little more specific. Radiotherapy, on the other hand, is the use of radiation to treat cancers. And radiotherapy can be what we call adjunctive, meaning in addition to chemotherapy, or itself therapeutic. So the tumors that respond well to just radiotherapy. There are other tumors that are so large, what they do is that they use radiotherapy to make them smaller, and then they become more manageable for surgeons to remove and so on. And in some cases, the combination of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, like for example, in breast cancer, you get your courses of chemotherapy and then you get your courses of radiotherapy as additional treatment. So that's the difference between the two.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. And I have one last question. Smoking and cancer. Is it just tobacco that causes cancer, or is it smoking?
So the question is, without asking the question, does smoking marijuana cause cancer? Because that's the underlying question, right? That's the underlying question. So we had the definition of carcinogen earlier, any agent or drug or chemical which is able to cause cancer. So I'm certain that contained in packets, contained inside whatever spliff there might be, there could be carcinogens. And the simple fact that you are smoking, smoke is toxic to cells. You're not supposed to have your cells inside your esophagus or inside your mouth or in your nose exposed to smoke, which is why we hold our noses when there's fire, because you're not supposed to be inhaling smoke and so on. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I think I said it 3 times. The Minister of Health and Wellness,
yeah,
right? He needs to thank me publicly. He has advised that you should not smoke, that smoking is bad for your health. And I believe that smoking, whatever it is you smoke, banana leaves, whatever it is not good for your health. But certainly they've tested cigarettes, and they've however many compounds that are in there that cause cancer. So which is why the advice is that you shouldn't smoke.
Yes, and that's what we want young people to hear.
Yes, they've said, was it my dad that said it? Somebody in my family said it, and I'm sure other people all around have said it. If you were supposed to smoke, you would have been born with a chimney. So we're not meant to smoke.
No. Thank you so much. I'm looking to see if there are any more questions.
Well, my question, yes, as we need to wind up, but my question, so since we were talking about HPV vaccine and using that as a means to prevent the development of cervical cancer, and the pap smear, the screening test for cervical cancer, the question is, should virgins have a pap smear? So let's see what the people in the chat think about that. Should virgins have a pap smear? Because the recommendation is at age 21, whether or not you have been sexually active, you should have a pap smear. That's the recommendation. So what do we say?
Let's give it a few minutes.
Oh, sure. And whilst we're waiting, the question with the gentleman, what I wanted to highlight there is that there are so many symptoms. He was losing weight, he wasn't eating, and he was having back pain. It could have been that his back pain was as a result of lifting weights in the gym, and he was a foreman, and he could have had hyperthyroidism, for example, or he could have been developing diabetes. So just because, or he could have had HIV, so just because you see somebody losing weight doesn't mean that they have cancer. But usually that's one of the things that comes to mind, especially if the weight loss is rapid. Okay. Any yeses?
No? We have 50% yes and 50% no.
Okay, so we'll put it down to personal decision then. That is the decision of the individual. She would have to determine whether or not she is going to have a pap smear before having sexual intercourse.
So, Dr. Renee, I want to say that this has been a very enlightening, very deep presentation on cancer. We touched on so many different areas. We went into so many different types of cancer, different areas, different scenarios. And I'm sure that persons who are on tonight are going away thinking about it more, thinking about how they can take care of their bodies more, their families' bodies more, and thinking about getting screened and getting a little bit more education and continuing to get screened as they go through their life. So I want to thank you so much for this presentation that you have given to us tonight. And then I want to ask you if you have any final words for our audience.
I just want to echo what you said, that screening tests are important. So you have that discussion with your doctor about when you should start screening for particular things based on your family history and your risk factors. I also believe that you need to have a family physician and other healthcare providers, your pharmacists and your podiatrists and so on, with whom you can have an open discussion. If you try to have a discussion with any of your healthcare providers and you're not getting anywhere, find another healthcare provider. And the last thing I want to say is try your best to move and be healthy and to make the right choices. It's not easy. Convenience is the way we live in most cases. You know, it's convenient for us to eat bread as opposed to standing up and chopping things for a salad. But we have to start thinking, you know, what do I want my life to look like down the road? Certainly. So, and it has been my pleasure to do this presentation. And of course, if you get any persons coming to you asking questions in areas that they wish to have clarified, I would be happy to do some more research and to give you the answers to getting back to those unanswered questions. So thank you again, and you're welcome.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, if you have any persons who missed this presentation, they can go back and see it on YouTube. So before we say goodbye, I would like to encourage all of you to join us next week, Wednesday, where we will focus on crime and violence and the impact on the family with presenter Cheryl Willoughby, who is the director of the National Task Force on Crime. And we look forward to seeing you then. So thank you again, Dr. Boyce, and we want to wish all of you a wonderful night.